Well, you've done it again. We're here live with Coffee with Humans, and my new friend, Stephen. Welcome to Coffee with Humans.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So we know each other just a tiny bit. Most of my guests I just meet raw, right when they come into this, backstage thing, and we have a couple tech checks and whatnot.
Yeah,
But we met just a couple months ago when I was on your podcast.
absolutely. Yeah, that was a fun time. It was probably one of the most relaxed podcasts we've had because that is the essence of Jason Todd.
That's what they're going to put on my epitaph.
It's just
At least he was relaxed.
He was chilled. No pun intended.
I suppose if I could have something, I will take that.
All right. No, absolutely.
Well. So I'm curious what you're now on this video cast, which takes a bit of courage to come live. Why'd you click the button to have coffee with me?
Well, see, here's the thing. So your caricature that you have cartoon wise looks like such a cool guy with such a perfectly round head. See, when I was in high school, they shaved, and I'm from Chicago, so they still allow this to happen in high school. They would shave your head bald as an initiation into varsity football. And so it's probably illegal in many. It was probably illegal then, but it was just part of one of the initiation things. And because they respected me, I was an athlete. They knew me. They didn't make me do it, but I felt like for solidarity purposes, I had to get it done. And I had the most awkward shaped head. I have this. I look like an alien under this hair. I hope I never lose my hair. But you have like this perfectly shaped. It's done right. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. So I said that seems like a cool guy to have coffee with.
Well, I will give your regards to my mother and father for creating such a perfectly round head. I'm actually afraid to go completely bald because I feel like I've gained weight over COVID. So I'm probably 20 pounds heavier than I reasonably should be, maybe 30 pounds. And now I've got this, kind of a more of a round face. And if I had no hair, I feel like I would lose all definition and I would just be like this plump little ball rolling around. And I'm not into that.
I made a mistake one time and I really feel bad about this. I had a client who, it's hard not to say his name because his name goes so well with what he's. All right, I'm just going to say it. Hopefully, he'll never see this.
This is live, just so you know. I can't retract it.
I know. I'm so sorry, Jeff. So his name is Chef Jeff, right? And so he's a cook. He runs a catering company, and they do phenomenal work, and they have some of the best food. And his history is that he comes from a special line of cooks that cook barbecue like nobody's business. So in Minneapolis, you've got the most famous history of barbecue is Cook's. As a matter of fact, when you think of Famous Dave, he worked at Cook's is where he got his start, right? So Cook's is his place. So if you know Famous Dave's, this is where the genesis of it was. So, and I wasn't paying attention. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking I had known at that point Chef Jeff for probably close to 15 years. So I've known him for a long time. And but over the previous like 5 or 6 years, he had started going to the gym and he had really, really bulked up. Got really, really fit. But in my mind, because I've known him for 15 years, I remember him being just a little bit more pleasantly plump, right? And so I went to Fever, had a caricature drawing because his reputation is so fun loving, he's so energetic and everything. I said, people are going to love this. So I created a caricature. And when I had them create it, I used an old picture and it was just like, I posted online just to get people's opinion and everybody just loved it. That's Chef Jeff. That is so him. They loved it. He hated it.
Oh no.
And I couldn't figure out why. It was like, you see where this is going, right? I'm like, people will love this. They love your brand. This will really cement in it. This will be you to the world. And he hated it. Tossed the idea. about a year
Oh,
later, we're in a conversation about his fitness regime. I said, boy, you got to be really tough. And then I looked and noticed. I said, oh my gosh, he's pretty strong. And I realized I had flubbed. So my great genius, which I believe is still a genius idea, was shot down because of my irreverence of his workout. I just don't make that mistake again. I'll never make before you create a caricature of somebody. And so I like what you've done. I mean, if you're used to being about 30 pounds lighter, I like what you've done. You've left your previous self in infamy.
yes. Well, I put this together because I had this idea, because I created the caricature thing, not the graphics of it, but I had this idea. I was like trying to
Yeah,
brand this thing and
yeah,
make it, and I was resistant, like
yeah.
because I don't like to, it might seem odd, but I don't like to put myself out there as me, right?
Mhm.
And I was resistant because I was like, oh no, like but I felt like in a talk show type thing, you got to put your face out there. It makes it more uh approachable, let's say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought, well, how about a cartoon, right? A cartoon.
Safe.
And
Sounds
so
safe.
I did like you, I went to a couple of places and had tweaks done and iterations, and then came across this and thought, is it a perfect representation of me? No, but it's cute, and
And
it's
people,
funny because I was very worried. I was worried about the reaction of it, right?
yeah,
And so I'm always kind of tickled when people are like, "Hey, yeah, that caricature of your
it's
face,
perfect.
of your face."
It's like that's perfect. Well, and it's nice. Now, but here's a question though: have
Yeah.
you ever been inspired whenever you looked at someone's website and they had a picture that was more than 2 decades? And when you meet
Right.
them, that is not you anymore. I mean, but
Oh yeah.
they have their profile picture. It's like high school prom. I mean, what is that? I mean,
Yeah.
I love when people do that, though. I
Sometimes you
do.
can see it right away before you know them. Like I've with you, I've seen some people like in real life, and then I look at their their LinkedIn photo, or whatever. I'm like, that's not the okay. I get what you're doing, but
Mhm.
no
Yeah.
harm, no foul. You can just be whatever age you currently are, in my book.
Look,
But
exactly.
sometimes you see it, and the picture's like faded. It's just like it's it's visually, it's like it's like the old furniture that I've
Yeah.
had once found from Salvation Army or something. It's like it's just a
Yeah.
little bit off.
Yeah.
you know
You wonder if you're if you're visually impaired or if they're like mentally impaired. I mean, just like how do you still use that? I mean,
yeah.
it says class of '98.
I hope to age gracefully. Like it's kind of a goal of mine to just kind of let my whole body just kind of do its thing. Like I'm losing hair, and I got a second like bald spot that started in the back, which
Yeah,
somehow I'm guessing will connect to the two in the front.
it's a
And
path.
then what do I do? Like I don't know. I just keep trimming it down, and
Yeah.
I've got friends who have gone completely bald. They just shave their head because there's a little bit left, and I've wondered, will that be me? Will I look weird? And some people are like, I love bald heads, and then and
Mhm.
I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not sure that I have the confidence for
You
that.
know what? I'm gonna vote for bald. I'm gonna give you permission. Go do it. I'm a permission giver. I don't know if you guys knew that about me or not, but that's what I do. I walk around giving people permission to do stupid stuff that they would never do otherwise. And I'm just gonna let you know, you are free from this moment on.
Oh, well, thank you.
I set you free to go bald if you want.
I accept that and pull it through the screen, and then I'll put it on like I'm putting on a cloak. I'm putting on the cloak of Stephen's
Yeah.
permission.
There we go. And then
Tie it in the front.
if it takes you a couple years to fill out that cloak and finally go bald, I understand. But I'm guessing there will be a point in time. But yeah, no, my granddad went bald, perfectly round head. My other grandfather had an egg shaped head like mine. It just is what it is. But you have the permission. This, I mean, alien predator, absolutely not.
You know what though? I did. So I went through this weird phase. I don't know why we're talking about being bald, but I went through this weird phase, and I have got pictures to show it. several years ago, maybe now 6 or 7 years ago, where I thought with this baldness thing, I thought I would grow it out a little bit and then gel it and like spike it up. Oh man.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I would not have given you permission for that.
no, thank you. And somebody should have told me. Like friends, family, somebody should have come around and said, "Hey, Jace, we love you, but that is really not good."
You didn't notice the fake
terrible.
smile? There's a real smile. You know that, oh, and their eyes are moving around like, please God, give me something to say.
Yeah, I don't. It was weird. It legit was a weird look, and because then also there's like nothing back here. I mean, it's like it's nothing was there, so it's like
you can't. It's like you can't see it. And I'll make since you're making a rare confession, I'll make a rare confession.
Okay.
My hair grows out really fast. Therefore, when in the past, last week, I try to color it for a long time. For a long time, I did not realize how bad it was to have everything you could see colored and everything you can't. Everything you can't not colored. I mean, I didn't realize how bad it was. And like you, nobody told me. It's like,
why do we do that to each other? Why do we just let somebody like just walk off? And everybody's looking around going, he's walking off. He's walking off. I don't know. He's walking off.
So you got a pepper head and you have a salt. You have a salted bag. It's like, why wouldn't somebody tell me?
That's terrible. People shouldn't do that to one another.
It's just like, I mean, I'm sure I was a joke at every football game. Look at it. Whoa, that's new.
Exactly. Yeah, people should look out for one another. This is part of caring for other people. Is to just let them know, hey, what you're doing there. I get the experiment, but it's not. You're not doing it well.
Without question. I'm just disappointed. I really, you know what? I am disappointed with human nature and where we've gone. We have really fallen. I'm just saying.
Yes. Well,
even if they want to offend me, they could have said baseball cap. They could have said something. Put something on it. That thing is ugly. It looks like a. Anyway, sorry. All right.
Well, I tell you what. This is this. I'm going to circle this back to the title of what this chat was about. When I asked you what you were thinking about leadership and having conversations between communities, and I think this is directly applicable.
Absolutely.
To how people communicate with one another, especially in situations where we anticipate this is going to be a weird or awkward conversation that the other person might not like. Absolutely.
And I it's interesting because, being from Chicago and how Chicago is, it's not very different than many other large cities in the fact that people are direct about how they feel about you. They show you all types of beautiful art as you're driving past them if you cut them off in traffic. There's gangs. It's just all types of fingers and all types of things that they just keep throwing up there, and it's just like, I mean, it's stressful because everybody's on top of each other, so it's a little hostile. It's like, especially the inner urban city where I grew up, it's just tense. There's a little bit of tension. And everybody's, somebody drops their books on a bus, everybody, somebody shoot. So we're kind of tense. And so we don't have time for BS. We tell people, if I don't like you, you really get on my nerves or whatever it is. And so there's just a little bit more directness. I moved to Minnesota where things are a little bit more spaced out. And they call it Minnesota nice. And it's this plastic smile that people put on this. We talked about this before, this thin veneer that people put on. And it's not that they don't like you. It's that if they don't like you, they don't tell you. So you don't know the difference between those who do and those who don't. And most people are just pretty much agnostic. They don't care about you.
Right.
And so it's just like, there's, and so when you talk about, in Chicago, if you had two Polishes and you were walking down the street, and you know, if you're from Chicago, you love Polish. It's just who you are. It's part of the. It's part of something that's in the air. You know, you're at a Cubs game or whatever. You like, you got two Polishes. If you ask me, do I want one? I say sure, and I'll start reaching for one. In Minnesota, you're supposed to ask 3 times. Would you like some? And the first response is supposed to be, no, that's okay. No, really, I've got 2. And then you're supposed to say, are you sure? He said, no, absolutely. Here, take it. I can't eat all of this. And then you're free to take it. Only after the 3rd permission. This is stupid. So we talk about communities talking to one another. So I came up here as a college kid as the most obnoxious, crazed, rude person. You offer, okay, thank you. I believed people when they told me something. But there are social rules and social contracts depending upon the culture that you find yourself in. And that's one thing that, so we all construct a social agreement. There's a social contract or an agreement that we make with one another about how we'll interact with one another. You know, a formal example is the U.S. Constitution, but all of us have informal ones. And depending on where you live, it shifts slightly from place to place. And people that are in rural communities have a certain type of way, a culture in which they interact. People that are in interurban have a way in which they interact. And so it's just interesting that when we start talking about having conversations with communities, you can be having 2 different conversations if you're 2 people from 2 different communities using the same words, the same inflections, and the same voice. And I find that, I guess, just the way life is.
It is. I agree with you. It is the way life is. I experienced that in my own family circles. So my dad is infamous for, you know, we'll be sitting down eating food or whatever, and he'll just say, like, to my mom, "Hey, do you want a little bit more?" And what he's really trying to say is, "I'd like more, and I'd like to go get some. Is that okay?" And it's like, why? What? Just go. And so we always say, "Dad, do you want more?" He's like, "Yeah, that'd be good." And it's like, why check? I understand. I was scheduling.
I'm glad you never invited me over.
I was scheduling dinner with my sister and her family recently, and she's like, "Hey, are you available this weekend?" I was like, "No, I'm not available." That, you know, and I said, "But next weekend, I'm good." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And this is texting back and forth. And she says, what day is good for you? I was like, and she's like, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was like, Saturday night, or, you know, anytime Saturday night or Sunday night. And she's like, okay, how about Sunday night? I was like, yep, sounds good. She's like, what time? 5, 5:30, 6, 6:30? And I was like, just pick a time. I just want to pick a time. It's okay.
Specific. You know, that's very specific.
You just pick a time, you'll be fine. And I remember growing up that we'd be driving down the street. My mom and I was, by the time I was a little bit older to remember kind of some of these things, my brother and sister were gone. So it's just me and my parents. And you know, Dad would be looking at Mom. What would you like for food? I don't know. You decide. Well, what sounds good to you? I don't know. What do you? And they go back for it. And before we chose a place to eat, people be heated with one another, going just pick a place. Mm-hmm. And it gets back to this idea, like, I don't do that. I can't. Like, I cannot get lost in this minutia of just like, what would you like to eat and when would you like to do it? And like, I'm more like the Chicago kind of person who just be like, okay, I'm going to pick the place, and that's the way it's going to be.
Yep. Well, do you have enough energy to be that other way? I mean, and that's the question. I mean, there's so many things, good things, causes. Children are starving all over the world. There's homelessness as a chronic issue. There's all types of addictions. I mean, there's so much good places we can put our energy as human beings. Why do we put it into these meaningless back and forth conversation? And you know, the worst question to ask me? Do you want that last bite? Because that's not really a question.
Right?
It's really a
Exactly.
statement. I want the last bite, and I just want to do the polite thing of asking
Right.
you if you want.
I've
Say
tried
it
to
what
give
it
up.
is.
I've tried to give up on this whole thing because I spent a long time trying to make sure everybody's happy. And
Mm.
I've realized that that didn't necessarily get me anywhere.
Yeah.
And it aggravated me. And sometimes it aggravates the other person
Yeah.
because just do it. And if somebody's not happy, like to your point, like, hey, do you want this? You asked me.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if I say no, I don't want it, I actually mean no, I don't
No, I
want it.
don't want
Do
it.
not
Right.
ask me again.
Right. Boy, you would have trouble up here. I'm telling you. You'd be fighting back and forth.
It's fun though. I mean, so
Yeah.
I think one of the opportunities, this is my personal opinion. I think one of the opportunities between cultures in kind of these microcosms, city to city, and then we've got these macro cultural issues, is an idea of just being curious about the other. Like, just be curious, because I think one of the opportunities of life is to figure out how to work together. Because if everybody was like people in Chicago, like
Oh,
I agree with you, the tension is so high when you're driving in Chicago. I'm just huh, like nobody talk to me. I'm just trying to figure out if I should turn up here or turn over there, because if I don't, like, I don't know if I'm going to get shot or if like I'm going to get yelled at or people are going to stop the car. What happens? I don't know.
mhm.
And and if everybody was laid back and like, I don't know, doing nothing today, neither
Gawking
one
at
is
the
going to do
police.
good.
They
Yeah,
gawk.
neither
I'm
one's going
gonna
to
tell
do
you
good
what
on
they
its
do.
own.
Like, oh, I wonder what's happening there. I've got to get to work. You're honking on the horn.
Right?
They just want to look. Oh, somebody has a flat tire. I mean, that's just the overly laid back version. No, and I think it's there's so many elements that play a role into this. And like you say, I mean, I joke about being annoyed by it. I there are times I do get annoyed by gawkers and other things where I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm too impatient for that. I was not blessed with a gift of patience. It's not in me. I'm
Well, don't
very
pray for it. Don't
no,
don't just don't do
no.
that,
I've learned that. I've learned that lesson. No, I love the quote. I think it was John Maxwell says, "Patience is a virtue, just not one of mine." So it's just like, I'm just no. I don't want it. I think patience is something that other people really do really good at. So I'm good with that. But so I do get impatient, but at the same time, um, it is an entertainment. I mean, it is really, it's like if there were, if you treat life like a human zoo, in which you get to go around and see the different uh, shades and experiences and treasures. And I've had the privilege of being able to go along around the world. And I remember I lived in Costa Rica for about a year, and I was living in Costa Rica and going to language school, and we had to pick up an article every day and read the article as we were learning Spanish. It was just it was painful. I'm much rather talk to people than trip over words all day. But one day I picked up an article and I never forgot it. It's just fascinated me. And it says 88% of Costa Ricans, they call them ticos, uh, know openly say they discriminate against Nicaraguans.
Hmm.
And Nicaraguans make up about 25% of the population in Costa Rica. A lot of stuff happened in Nicaragua, and they crossed over and they made it all. And I met people, good leaders, and they've just got like these nasty stereotypical jokes against Nicaraguans. And it was unbelievable to me that was such a passive. It's one of the only countries in the world, very few countries have no standing army.
Hmm.
Costa Rica is one of the only countries that do. They're pacifists. They're like, we don't fight, and yet they've got this mean streak of aggression. Not all of them, but culturally, it was acceptable to discriminate against Nicaraguans, and because I'm from the United States, and I know as a person of color what it's like to be on the other side of that coin. it was probably disheartening for me. It really was. And even though I had friends that made jokes about los nicas, and they call them nicas. That's what they call Nicaraguans, and they call ticos the Costa Ricans. And so, ticos and nicas, it's like this thing, and it's like the jokes and the insults and the subservient treatment and the lower jobs within the country. Just really, really, really consistently, it kind of gripped me a little bit, and I got this image of the United States, because, believe it or not, as an American, it doesn't really matter the color of my skin. The most powerful color in the world is green. They assume that I have money. I don't know where they got that idea, but I had them all fooled. Jason, I had them all fooled. I made them think I was rich. But the assumption is, if you're coming down there from the United States, I mean, you've got money. And so I was treated in many cases better than they even treated other Costa Ricans there. But you could tell this hierarchy, and I know there's that new book that came out last year. I haven't read it, but called Caste. And talks about the people ridicule the caste system in India and the Hindu culture, but we've just reconstructed it in a different way based upon capitalism and not place of birth, and how we anyway. So I find that interesting.
I think this has never been any different throughout thousands of years of recorded history. People always build a hierarchical system of the haves and the have-nots, and the people who and give honor, whether made up honor or actual honor, to people who are in charge. That is exactly what happens. And the people who are in charge historically, and it recreates itself. I mean, we're no different. I don't know why the U.S. thinks that we are somehow magically different than every other culture that has ever existed and ever will. Yeah. The people in authority want to stay in authority. Yeah. I've said this about people with their, jobs or whatever. A lot of why conversations don't happen and all that other stuff is that the first question when a person is presented is with, some change that needs to be made or something like that, is, how do I keep my job? Mm-hmm. That's self-protection. And even if they're not asking it, from their prefrontal cortex, their conscious mind, they're asking it subconsciously. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that I keep my job. Mm-hmm. It takes a rare individual to say, hey, the thing that I've been in charge of is no longer necessary.
Yeah. Well, I hear what you're saying, that America's no different, but I would say that the United States is a little bit worse than historical cultures, because when you look at historical cultures which have done bloody, brutal things to one another, it's always been around these borders and these territories and people from this land and that land, and so they're fighting against each other in order to maintain. And in America, we're the only one that's done it to ourselves. And this is what I mean. So when the British, the French, the Spanish, all those wonderful European countries start making their way over here, the first thing they did was they demonized the savages, is what even Shakespeare called them savages, and wiped out over 90% of the native population. They then were bringing over Africans, but at the original part, they weren't bringing them over to be lifetime slaves. They brought them over as labor, and they were actually entitled to the same rights as the poor whites that came over from Europe to be serfs and slaves. And so according to that rule, after 7 years, the whole thing they believed they were fulfilling the manifest destiny, what they called it when the children of Israel crossed over and they escaped religious oppression. They basically were saying that. And so after 7 years, you were set free. And that was true no matter whether you were African but in the 1600s, they really began to see that the poor whites and the poor blacks that would get their freedom began to create these rebellions against the white rich, and they were the minority. This power class were the midst, and they weren't called white yet. That's a whole nother thing, because you were called the origin of your birth. And so for the first time in world history that we know of, in 1691, they called people white, like self-proclaim themselves. So the Indians call them, or the natives called them paleface, but they never self-proclaimed themselves as a color. Going all the way back in history, they called the people from Africa Moors, but the Moors, the black people didn't call themselves Moors. You know, no one ever referred to themselves, because what they were is always considered normal. They only had labels for other. And for the first time, people self-identified as a label. And he says, no, we are white. And so they created a social power structure in order to stop the poor whites from fighting with the poor blacks, and say, no, we'll give you a little bit of power if you'll join with us to keep them in. And that's when slavery became permanent. And that's when it became, no matter if you had black skin, you're going to be a slave. And so they created this hierarchy. And Irish, sorry for all the Irish people, they weren't even white yet. They weren't considered white. That's how much the English hated the Irish, that they were not originally considered white. And they have a little lighter skin than the British, I'm just saying. And then once they got done with that, but 5 boys were sold down into Mexico to people of browner skin. And that's when the Irish people says, no, we can't allow that. And they pulled them back and said, okay, Irish, you can be white too. And it's like, so you have these things, and you have these communities that were, before they were naturally constructed borders and boundaries, and they were tribes fighting against one another. For the first time, he says, no, it's not just tribal, because we can't figure that out. It's going to be based upon not the place you're from, but the complexion of your skin. That was a first. And that was the birth of racism. Tribalism always existed. Country patriotism, wars, religious wars always existed. But based upon the color of your skin, we can take credit for that.
It's just I think back to your earlier point, I think it's it's just a new iteration of classification of people who have power and authority and people who don't. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that while the principles that we have in our Constitution are probably the best system that has been created, mm-hmm. I think the wonder of that system is that we have to work it out together. Mm. And any movement where we don't have to work it out, then we cause problems. That's why I think, like, I think it's civil unrest and that type of stuff. It's I don't know if I'd call it bad. I think it's important to have, because there's a you're probably familiar with this. How is it phrased? In interpersonal relationships, when no one's arguing, there's a problem because nobody's passionate about, or nobody has a voice, or the person who thought they had a voice just gave up. Mm-hmm. And so if we're designed to have healthy arguments, and that I think is the important thing for everybody to keep in mind. Are we allowing those healthy arguments? Do we have anybody who's disagreeing with us? Because if we're just surrounded by a bunch of people who don't disagree with us, we are on a wrong path very quickly. Mm-hmm. And nobody invites that. I think. I don't think we're like, hey, you know what? Let's have an argument around mm-hmm. dinner tonight. Yeah. Let's really hash this shit out in front of all these people publicly. Mm-hmm. We don't want to do that. However, I think it's important. And our system is designed for that. And that's I think what we need to keep in mind. This idea that we shouldn't be arguing and everybody should somehow agree is nonsense.
Right. See, but here's a problem. That this is one of the things that I struggle with. I mean, you're talking about, this is the ultimate delusion. The people with power, this oligarchy of power, have come together and convince the people without power. Let's say they're if along color lines, let's say they're white constituents. They've convinced them that they don't have power because it's been taken by the other people without power, and they stand back and watch them fight it out. I mean, if there isn't a word for insanity, that is the best picture of insanity that I've ever seen. So these white people with no money are fighting against black people or brown people with no money, as the people with the money says it's their fault. That's the insanity. And we're not talking about it.
I agree with you. And that's where, so, that whole, I don't know if when I was growing up, we used to kind of have this thing. So people like, you don't need black people. Like, yeah, I got a black friend. And it's like, well, in my school, I just happened to go to a school that was, we didn't have a lot of black folks there. Mm-hmm. I didn't think anything of it. Like how would I know the difference? I'm just living my own life, just like I'm sure somebody else is just living their own life, and it's just the way it is,
mm-hmm.
And then as I got older, and I got outside of my my scope or whatever, the way I kind of grew up, I went to college and then I met new people and just got involved with people. It really didn't, to me, I've been exposed to people in different cultures. You talked about, traveling the world. Start traveling the world and you'll find people of all sorts of cultures. And then all the stuff that you think is crazy in the United States or that you like is so terrible. It's like, well, it's not that bad. Go across the pond and live in some, some culture that's just, you don't even know if you could buy property and it'll still be there tomorrow. Like mm-hmm. that's a problem.
Yeah.
And you're right that we have been programmed in some ways, I think, to fight among each other while somebody's saying, hey, you look at that. Did you see that punch you threw? Did you see that? Do you see what he's looking at you? And it's like the bully's actually over here. I've never had any issues, not one issue along some sort of color line or other strange, strange thought process of division that has led to any disruption of my life in any way. I don't understand. I don't quite understand it. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's, and I don't want to say that I feel like I'm supposed to not say that, because then I feel like somebody's going to say, yeah, you're short-sighted. And that's just your white privilege. It's like, I don't, I don't think, I don't know. I don't know. You're welcome at my table. You're back.
Okay. Working through this program, we're looking at neuroencoding and how people absorb and understand messages and how those messaging shapes and directs their life. And there is, and I can't go too deep into this because we just don't have time, but the reality is that as the consistency of someone who experiences fear, concern, worry, trauma. So you take Rwanda, you take many of the countries, Liberia, many of the people that have been in civil war, Somalia for dozens of years. The trauma just doesn't exist in their limited experience of 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10 years of war. It stays in your blood because the body is meant to process trauma in a way where it prepares you to either flee or fight. And so it drops all types of norepinephrine and all types of dopamine and all types of adrenaline into your blood. But when that sustains for a long period of time, it has a traumatic effect that over time begins to affect your blood. And that's why there's so many there's so many different diseases that emerges from suppressed and overwhelmed trauma. Well, that stuff passes through the blood from generation to generation over time. So systematically, people want an easy solution. Well, people hate each other, just tell them to stop. People doing crime, just say stop. People, and they don't understand that. I wish there was a bumper sticker. So many people that just want a bumper sticker solution for every problem in life. And I can appreciate that. But with the complexities of what we're dealing with from the human experience, it's so vast, it's so wide, it's so complex that I understand wanting a simple solution. But what do you do when that's not available, and where we stick our heads in the sand and ignore the complexities of the world that exists? And so that's where humility comes in. And I think that where I see most people, when I see this argument, I see a couple things happen. So we had the death of George Floyd, who was murdered on the streets of Minneapolis right here. And then a few nights ago, Dante Wright, who was killed while trying to flee a police officer. And it's like, I was talking with a friend. I was like, well, the reason this conversation gets so heated is because some people, a part of the culture, is looking for a reason why that's an anomaly, when systematically I still have trauma related to police. I've never committed a crime, never been to jail. And yet, because of my experience growing up with police officers in my neighborhood and the threats that I got from police in my high school, my brother, who's a Chicago police officer, I walked it where they do breakfast over in South Side of Chicago every single Sunday for the community there. I walked in and I literally felt my body froze because of the experiences I've had. The people I've been pulled over by, times that my cars has been searched, wrong time, wrong place, wrong neighborhood. And so I have those things going on in me, not because I want to have those things. And so to have a dialogue about those things means being able to come to grips that it's not so simple. And every time that there's a problem, anybody, and I hate to say this, but anybody that's a person of color somehow earns the right to have a microphone and spout out foolishness from every corner of the globe. And it's like, no, we can't have civil talks if everybody has permission just to, and so it's so difficult in this tension point, and you get people who are really angry and nobody has the ability to express what's wrong.
I think we have a number of, on both sides. Let's say if we term this a side argument, because it kind of feels like it's a black and white argument thing going on, which is not to downplay the seriousness of people's experiences, but I feel like we have racial ambulance chasers now. It's like oh my God, were you in an accident? It's time, get your due. Right? And now it's like, hey, whoa, wait a second. There was this time when I was mistreated. Who's gonna tell me that they're sorry? And tell me you're sorry with the things that I'd like. I'd like a new house, and I'd like new stuff, and I'd like this and all sorts. So it's like, wait a second, hold on it. Just relax for a second. And I think that happens on both sides. It's like, who's going to get me my due? How do I hold on to my stuff, and how do I take your stuff? It's like, come on. I feel like one of the best opportunities we have. Remember how in school we used to go to field trips?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like you get outside of this little microcosm of your own culture and all your own people, and you go to see like I went to Chicago and we saw a building that ran on, I don't know, they tried to cool it with ice at one point in time, which seems like an asinine idea, and sure enough didn't work, you know, and all these other things. But we saw stuff, and it was there to educate us into experiences we will never ever have. And I'm wondering when we're gonna get cultural field trips mandatory in this United States of ours, because we have so many different cultures that we have zero understanding of, and it is so foreign to us. And yet, if you were just to hang out for a short period of time, you'd be like, oh, These are just people. Like it don't
Well,
matter. All of
well,
these things that we think divide us have nothing at all to do with anything.
I think we're going to have challenges with that as long as there are people profiting off of the
Right.
division. And I think that's where it all is. It's all going to go stem back to the same, Bacon's Rebellion, 1691. Somebody profited by putting citizens against citizens, and that's and so as long as people can profit from putting citizen against citizen, we're going to have this problem. And until we wake up and resist the urge to be outraged by everything that takes place, there's no way you can convince me. And I know there are people that have arguments about, well, George Floyd was on drugs and this, that, and the other. I saw the video. The resistance was non-existent from camera to camera all throughout. What he did to that man was unnecessary. They could have put him in a police car. They'd done anything with him. He was just sitting there. He was sitting there docile. That's unnecessary. And yet there's these arguments to say, well, because going to your point, because that happened, that gives me the right to demonstrate my anger in ways that destroys the community. No, what happened was wrong. And I think that should be that much should be acknowledged. And I, said being connected to police officers everywhere, people came in hour. He says, no, we see what happened and we can see with our own eyes that was wrong. There's no justification for what happened in that scenario and that man. And the only thing that it hopefully opened up the conversation about is every time that I've been put over by police and my car has been searched and I've been treated what I feel unfairly by police, and I've told a white friend, they ask me, are you sure? And that is offensive to me. And at least in that moment, people stop asking that question. So I don't know. There you have it.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and I think you hit the nail on the head. That as long as there are people profiting from unrest and certain conversations, the conversations will continue and they'll get worse. And it's almost by design. Mm-hmm. It's the way we are wired as people that we eventually, unfortunately, it's our bent that we have the ability to overcome. We have the ability to deal with it, and we're supposed to, I think. But as long as we, whether it's how do I keep my job, how do I stay in power, how do I keep my money, how do I profit off of you? It is that kind of thing that just it draws this stuff to the forefront, and I'm hopeful, and I'm happy for the conversations. That's the thing. Like, I'm happy that the conversations can be had, because there are countries in the world where these conversations cannot be had. Mm-hmm. You will be done and disappear. Ta-da! Mm-hmm. Problem solved. You'll disappear en masse.
Yeah, that's what they're finding a mirror right now.
Yeah. So this whole, like, to your points, like, before we prove each other right by going to extremes to deal with this stuff, it's like, take a dose of thankfulness for a moment and say, wow, we could actually have this dialogue. We could actually change laws to make things to hash out these conversations and come to resolutions. That to me is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that in all of these things, whoever's in charge of those conversations and having them, and the people, I think, of the United States need to always return to that point. Like, let's make sure we have a dialogue, an open dialogue, and are able to resolve these conversations. Mm-hmm. When anybody gets sanctioned off the stage, I feel like it's like, oh, that's a slippery slope. This happens in other countries, and we don't want to be those. That's why we have the United States, and we've been able to continue this long. But don't be so short-sighted and believe that we can't fall. At one time, mm-hmm. Rome was the world, basically, and Rome's no more.
Yeah, no, absolutely, awesome.
Well, brother, it's a good conversation.
Yeah, I know, and I'm sure we can go longer and longer if we didn't have meetings after this. So.
I know, right? Well, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Humans. I appreciate your insights. I appreciate your reflection, and having this type of conversation. I think it's great. So thanks for your time, man.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, to our viewers and listeners, this is Coffee with Humans. It is a candid conversation between strangers who become friends. Catch us live on YouTube and other places a couple times a week. We'll chat with you later.
One of the things I love about Coffee with Humans are the raw conversations I get to have, meeting new people just like you. If you or someone you know should be on Coffee with Humans, go to coffeewithhumans.com. Remember, the only rule is no sales calls.
This has been Coffee with Humans. Subscribe to get updates or click to have coffee with me. coffeewithhumans.com.